Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us for this presentation on the Master Plan and Redevelopment for St. Elizabeth Village. This presentation has been prepared for the current residents of the village, as well as those who may choose to make St. Elizabeth their home in the future. My name is Gary Zock, and I've had the privilege of working with Zest since March of 2014 on the redevelopment, as well as the construction of Upper Mill Pond. Our company was formed in 1989. We provide expertise in development, management, marketing, finance, legal, accounting related to life lease communities as well as senior housing developments. And we've successfully assisted over 70 life lease communities develop in Ontario, some 6,000 units. So the agenda for today's presentation is as follows. We'll start with some background on Zest Communities' vision for the village. We'll look at where this vision came from, what they hope to achieve. We'll then go in a fair amount of detail about the master plan. We'll look at the different phasing blocks, the number of units in each block, the height of buildings. We'll touch on things like parking. We'll look at amenities and green spaces. Then we will just talk about the municipal approvals, the timing of those approvals, what's required, look at the schedule for the development. And then lastly, we will touch on your questions. We had asked residents to submit their questions in writing to us, and the residents didn't disappoint us. We received lots of questions, and that was great. That's exactly what this process was intended to do. So what we've done is we've grouped those questions by different categories, and we'll go through those one by one at the end of the presentation. Zest Communities has made a commitment to its residents, and it's continuing with that commitment. And that commitment is to listen to your input and suggestions, keep residents informed throughout the process, make a difference to the St. Elizabeth community, minimize any disruption during the redevelopment of the village, improve the economic efficiency of operating the campus, and improve the quality of life for all those who choose to live and work here. Zest Communities has attempted to keep the residents updated on the progress of the master plan, but you have to keep in mind this is an evolving process. As studies become available, reports, information from meetings with municipal officials or consultants becomes available, the plan has changed. But we've now landed on what we think is an excellent master plan. Throughout the process, starting back in February of 2017, we had a number of information meetings to give you an idea of where we were at in this planning. And those meetings went right up until June of 2019. We also had a number of written update letters from January of 2018 all the way to October of 2020. And Zest Communities' commitment is to keep you informed, and this type of communication will continue into the future. We've also been in a variety of publications over the last 5 or 6 years. We've been in the Hamilton Spectator, Toronto Star, CBC The National, Globe and Mail, Construction Links, CHCH TV, CTV The Social, Canadian Business, Comfort Life magazines, and many more publications. And these are all available on the Zest website if you want to take the opportunity to have a look. The background and vision for St. Elizabeth Village and the redevelopment has not changed since the original concept was first adopted. This concept was developed by Forec architects out of Toronto, and they are one of the foremost theme park resort designers. They've done theme park resorts all over the world. So the original vision came from Forec, and that was for a multi-phase, mixed-use theme resort style community that meets contemporary living needs and expectations. There are still two major components to the redevelopment, that being the Village Square, which will be a mix of low-rise buildings, townhouses, offering restaurants, shops, and resident amenities, and what we call the cluster, which will be a series of mid-rise and low-rise residential buildings arranged around centralized amenity space. So the vision has not changed. How this vision will be implemented has changed over the last couple of years, and we're going to talk about that today. The inspiration for St. Elizabeth Village and the master plan actually comes from the villages in Florida. Some of you may have had the opportunity to visit the villages on one of your trips south. The villages, by the way, was the design concept of Forec Architects as well, the same firm that's working with us here in Hamilton. But the idea is to create a small town type ambience, a place where you can go and enjoy a coffee with a friend, stepping back into a simpler time of life when things were far less complicated. Certainly the small town ambience, I know a lot of residents have asked, are you still going to keep that quaint rural Ontario town? And the answer, yes, we're still looking at that type of ambience. We're looking at a variety of different historic appearances and appeal. Again, a small town Ontario type feel. Certainly a large part of the vision is to have varied architecture. So it looks like a small town which is developed over town with buildings from different eras. And as well, we want to create an abundance of outdoor gathering space and open areas. Some of these will be resident exclusive, some of these will be open to the general public, so that events such as the Canada Day celebration held here at the Village have a location, a permanent location, a home for such events. And we also are looking at small scale retail, not big box retail, not commercial plazas, something small scale again that looks like it's been fit into a small town over the years. Things like grocery store, health and wellness, personal services, something that the residents of the Village can enjoy without leaving their own neighborhood. The redevelopment of St. Elizabeth Village started with Upper Mill Pond. I'm sure many of you have driven past or walked past and seen the building up. The structure is now well above the tree line. And the estimated completion date for Upper Mill Pond is August of 2021, so just a little over 8 months away. So this will be the first phase of the redevelopment. On the ground floor of Upper Mill Pond will be the new health club. This health club is going to be approximately 10,000 square feet. It's going to have a new indoor pool and hot tub area. It's got a private patio off the indoor pool area. We'll have change rooms again, men's and women's, as well as a family change room. Saunas, washrooms. We'll have a dance and movement studio, cardiovascular weight training, and a therapy room. And these amenities and this health club is available to all residents of St. Elizabeth Village, not just the residents of Upper Mill Pond. And the construction cost of the health club has been paid by Zest Communities. They have a self-imposed levy for the development, any new development on the campus. Zest Community has set up a fund to look at upgrading existing amenities and adding new amenities. Certainly the health club is one of many new amenities that will be added here at St. Elizabeth Village. And here are just a couple images of what the new health club will look like. You'll see at the top of the screen the pool area. Off to the left of that pool, you'll notice the windows that go to the outdoor patio, and below the cardiovascular weight training room. As amenities are added to the campus, there certainly will be the need for more programming, and Zest is committed to providing that programming for its residents. Now let's get into the master plan update. Many of you may have seen the notices on site. Many of you may have gone onto the websites to download information, but we want to run through what exactly is going to be taking place here. So first of all, there's two major blocks being created. You'll see the one to the west, the northwest, is called the cluster phase. So this is right in the parking lot area where the current village center is located, the event tent you'll see up at the top. Along the top of the screen is Rymal Road. Along to the left of the screen is Garth Street. So this is where the ponds are located. You'll see there's 3 blocks, block 1, block 2, block 3. Block 3, we'll go into each of these blocks individually, but block 3 is where the St. Elizabeth residence is currently located. Then what we have the Village Square phase, and that's the phase at the northeast corner of the property where the Edelweiss barn is located. And I want to spend a little time just talking about each of these phases. First of all, the block 1 and 2, which is called the cluster at the corner of Rymal and Garth, you'll recognize the ponds and the parking lot area. Those areas will be redeveloped. Block 3 is the current home of St. Elizabeth Retirement Residence as well as the church. Those two buildings will remain where they are. We are looking at establishing more beds at the retirement residence, and we'll address that later. Then going to the other corner of the property where the Edelweiss barn is located, we call block 4. That's the Village Square block. And you know where that is. That's off of Bishop Ryan coming in off of Rymal. We're back at the master plan once again, showing the 4 development blocks. Again, top of the screen would be Rymal Road West To the left side of your picture would be Garth Street. You'll notice the roadway coming in off Garth Street. That follows pretty much the same path as Sister Elizabeth Way does now. And the road coming out at the top of the screen off of Rymel, that is Bishop Ryan. So block 1 is the corner, right at the corner of Garth and Rymel, what we call the cluster, that's block 1. Block 2 is basically the location of the presentation center where it currently sits on the campus. And block 3 is the existing home of St. Elizabeth Retirement Residence as well as the church. Then going over to the northeast corner or the right side, top right corner, that is block 4 and that is the Village Square. So we're going to go in a little bit of detail about each of these blocks now. Keep in mind that the master plan is just a general blueprint for development moving forward. Zest still has to go through the site plan review process. It still must go through the building permit review process. And it's these later 2 approvals that will shape the appearance and design of the building. The master plan just gives a general parameters for it. And keep in mind, right in the middle, just slightly off center in the middle of the screen, next to the Trillium Clubhouse, that shows the footprint of Upper Mill Pond. And as you know, Upper Mill Pond was zoned for 156 units, but only 76 units were constructed. So the master plan will establish a maximum number of units for each development phase, which Zest cannot exceed, but certainly it can build fewer number of units than what is approved. A large part of Zest's vision to create a resort lifestyle community revolves around the outdoor amenities and open spaces. And this particular diagram, it just gives an illustration of where some of these amenity areas and green spaces are proposed. Again, you'll see the Village Square on the right side of the screen, the Village Green, which is inside the secure gates. We'll talk about that a little later. In the cluster on the left side of the screen, in the cluster block, you'll see the ponds will be reshaped, as well as large amenity area, the cluster green, and smaller amenity areas. All of these areas will be linked by an integrated path system, so residents can move freely throughout the campus. In addition, the ponds that currently exist on the campus will be reshaped and improved to provide a much more enjoyable amenity area for all the residents. Let's take a look now at the types of buildings that you can expect as part of the redevelopment. Again, Rymel Road will always be at the top of the picture. Garth Street will always be on the left-hand side of the screen. You'll see the arrow pointed to the clusters. That is the highest density of residential construction going on. We've kept that as far away from the garden homes as possible. Those buildings will range from 4 stories up to 12 stories in height. And just to give you some terms of reference, the apartment building that just completed construction last year at the corner of Rymel and Garth, that is a 10-story apartment building. So that'll give you some idea of the size. Then behind the clusters, you'll see the low-rise 4-story apartment building. That's the location of the current presentation center. Then across from it is St. Elizabeth Retirement Residence with 100 new rooms being proposed. So the total density for the clusters is 898 units for all of those particular apartment buildings, including the St. Elizabeth retirement beds. Now over to the other side of the property, the northeast corner off of Rymel. That's 2 distinct sections. There's Village Square, which will be 128 apartment units as well as 49,000 square feet of retail commercial. And then below that, within the secure area, will be some additional garden homes, about 169 more garden homes within the gated areas. But again, stepping down as you get closer to Cardinal Macente, where they will be at the same size as the garden homes across the street. And keep in mind that this site slopes off quite a bit. From Rymel Road down to Cardinal Macente is probably about a 1.5 story drop. So there's quite a bit of difference in the elevation on this particular property. This slide defines the building heights in a bit more detail. You'll see that buildings A and B, the 2 that are closest to the corner of Rymel and Garth, are a 10-story, 12-story, stepping down to 8-story building. Building C is also a 10-story building, so we're keeping that higher rise buildings along Rymel. And building D steps down from 8 to 6 stories, and E and F are 4-story buildings. You'll also notice the central green that's being proposed here. and the amount of green space around this particular cluster. So even though there is a lot of density in terms of units here, there certainly is a lot of green space being provided, much more than you would typically see in this type of development. Again, we've talked about the open space. This is the open space in the cluster at the corner of Rymal and Garth. You see a nice large area here for outdoor gatherings and meeting space, walking paths, all interconnected with the village. So now we're moving over to Block 4, which is at the northeast corner of the property, what we call the Village Square, and that's the portion of the Edelweiss property closest to Rymal Road. Rymal would be just off the top of this picture. You'll see Bishop Ryan coming in on the left side. Building H is the proposed location for the grocery store. That would be a one-story grocer with 2 stories of residential above it. Building M will be a 3-story building as well. The ground floor is the proposed location of all of the retail and commercial uses, small scale. I'll go into those in a moment. And then surrounding them are buildings J, K, and L, which range in size from 4 stories to 6 stories in height. And in the middle of this cluster is the Village Square. This is a very generous square. It's 0.6 acres in size. That will be the focal point for many of the activities and programs going on. The retail will spill out onto the square. This would be a perfect spot for a small coffee shop where you could sit and watch activities in the square as you have your morning coffee or read your paper. Coming from Toronto, this is the type of environment that I'm used to and the type of environment I would like to live in. And this is one of the reasons why my wife and I bought at Upper Mill Pond, was so that we could get our foot in the door and be part of this community early on. Again, the Village Square will be the hub of activity here at the village. You'll see that the square itself is 0.6 acres, which is a very large open area. It opens onto the small scale retail as well as the backs of some of the residential buildings. This is where the local artisans could come to present their wares or have a farm market. So this is an exciting area to live in as well. And this, as I mentioned, will be available to the surrounding community as well as residents. You can walk from your garden home past the security gates to get to the Village Square and enjoy an evening or an afternoon with friends and neighbors. The types of programs and amenities and services which will be offered in the Village Square, you'll see on your screen. There's going to be a variety of retail and commercial spaces, again, small scale retail, as well as resident amenity areas, things like fitness, auditorium, theater. It's a place where you can walk from your garden home and spend an evening. You could enjoy some restaurant. There'll also be services. We've surveyed residents of the village and they gave us an idea of what was important to them, what would enhance their quality of life. Things like health and wellness services, general services like banking, insurance, health and beauty products and offerings, small scale retail we've already spoken to, as well as the Village Square itself can be used for seasonal activities, artisans galleries, and farmers markets. So this is going to be an exciting focus of the village. Behind the Village Square, we have some more residential units. Now this would be within the gated area. This is the only development other than Upper Mill Pond which will be within the gated area. There are a maximum of 169 units proposed for this particular area. We have low-rise apartments closer to the Village Square, closer to the top of the screen, away from the existing garden homes. As you get closer to Cardinal Macente, you'll notice they step down to a garden home scale. Zest also wants to create some more private green space for the residents. So here we have a picture of the Village Green, which is an open space right behind the town square. This would be available to the residents of the village to come and enjoy an afternoon in the park. Here we have what's called a massing view. This is a view as if you were in a plane at low elevation looking southeast across the village. You'll see in the bottom of the screen, you'll see, first of all, the residential apartment building that's currently at the corner of Rymal and Garth. Then you'll see the clusters, the higher rise residential with the reshaped ponds. You'll notice the setback of those apartment buildings from the existing garden homes. Then there are the existing garden homes, the beige buildings in the middle. Those homes will remain, they're not coming down. And then at the far top corner of the screen, you'll see the village square. So this gives you a very good idea of what the possible density of the village would look like when it was fully redeveloped. This is another massing view. This is along Bishop Ryan Way, a view to the east. So if you were coming off of Rymel Road, traveling into the village, this is what you would possibly see when you're coming down Bishop Ryan. You'll notice the scale again. Stepping down of the buildings from Rymel Road would be to the left of the screen. You'll notice how the buildings step down as we're getting closer to the garden homes. You'll also notice the architecture, the small town, rural, sort of quaint Ontario village type architecture that's being planned. So now you have a massing view of the village square. So you're looking west now across the redeveloped area. Rymel Road would be to the right side of the screen. You'll see the village grocer, which fronts onto Rymel Road, the village square, the 0.6 acre square we talked about earlier. The building in the foreground would be the small scale retail, which is adjacent to the surface parking area. But this particular masking view gives you a good idea of how much the site actually slopes down from Rymel Road to the existing garden homes, and how the taller buildings will actually not appear quite so tall because of the elevation. And one final massing view. This is looking northwest. You'll see at the very top of the picture the cluster units, the higher rise apartment buildings. But you'll also notice along Cardinal Macente the low-rise residential developments in white that step up as you get closer to Rymel Road and the village square. This will also give you an idea of the slope of the property and how we have buffered the garden homes from the higher density residential. So why is Zest undertaking the redevelopment? Well, here are some of the motivations and benefits, and we've talked about some of these earlier on. Certainly the main thrust of this is to add more amenities and to upgrade the existing amenities of the village. But also we want to continue the senior-focused nature of St. Elizabeth Village, the fabric, the identity it's established in Hamilton. We want to establish a village center for the community with a full range of shops and services and amenities for the residents, rehabilitate the existing amenities such as the Trillium Clubhouse, rehabilitate and enhance the quality of the existing ponds through good management and stewardship of our water quality and stormwater, and promote the social interaction through the design by adding a network of pedestrian pathways. And we talked about that a little earlier. Zest also hopes to create a network of streets focused on those walking through the community with a managed design for congestion and traffic calming. We're going to talk to this when we get into the questions a bit more. Zest wants to create an active and immersive community that is architecturally distinctive and memorable, not only for the residents living in St. Elizabeth Village, but also for the community. We want to create a personal and public domain of spaces that instills a sense of pride and ownership. And lastly, incorporate sustainable development thinking into all development decisions. The final benefit and motivation behind the redevelopment is obviously to improve the efficiency of operations. The impact of the new development on the existing St. Elizabeth Village is estimated to bring in another $400,000 annually towards the CAM funds. And this will go to directly offset any operational costs moving forward. And that is in addition to the $2,000 per unit which Zest has imposed upon itself as a development levy to go towards the improvement of the existing amenities and community. This slide will give you an idea of the municipal approvals and the steps that have already been undertaken by Zest. As I mentioned earlier, it has taken longer than anticipated because of the number of steps, but the terms of reference with the city were established in June of 2018. The ecological monitoring and data collection took place from June of 2018 to April of 2019. The formal consultation with the city took place in April of 2019. Then we had to go through a number of studies and reports, which took well over a year from May of 2019 to 2020. These were mostly related to the ponds and the restructuring of the stormwater management. We have received confirmation of the completed application from the city in August. Public notices, the signs that went up here at St. Elizabeth Village went up in September of this year, and we have our first public information meeting planned for November 24th. This is the tentative schedule moving forward on the master plan. As you know, we've applied for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. That has gone in the third quarter of 2020. We expect to have approval of that by the third quarter of 2021, so basically a year. Once that's approved, we go to draft plan registration, which will start in the third quarter of 2021 and go to the third quarter of 2022. Concurrently with that, though, we can start our site plan process for the first phase. So we're looking at starting that in the fourth quarter of next year of 2021, being completed in the third quarter of 2022. Building permit process will start in the third quarter of 2022, completed in the fourth quarter. So in all likelihood, the first phase of construction will not commence well until the end of 2022. In terms of the construction timeframe, that varies by phase, height of building, underground parking. Each phase could take anywhere from 18 months up to 2.5 years, depending on the complexity of construction. And that's still being looked at Zest. We're not sure which phase will go first. It'll depend on market conditions and what will benefit the community the most. That completes the formal portion of the presentation. In the letter inviting you to submit questions, there was a link provided. If you want to obtain more information or see the actual planning documents, we'd invite you to go to that link. But now what we'd like to do is we'd like to go through the questions that you asked. These questions, there was obviously some duplication in questions, so what we've attempted to do is put these into different categories such as traffic, safety, amenities, and we'll go through these one at a time, starting now. The first question is of a general nature. How have the plans changed as compared with previous plans shared with residents? Well, first of all, the number of residential units has decreased significantly from 1,500 down to 1,200 units. And that's due to the fact that we are no longer removing any garden homes as was once proposed. In addition, the retail area has also reduced significantly from 120,000 square feet down to 45,000. And lastly, as we've already discussed, the location of the village square and the residential cluster have now been reversed. The earlier plan showed the village square at the corner of Rymel and Garth. Now the village square is at the northeast corner off of Rymel Road. We went back in time to look at the original master plan proposed for St. Elizabeth Village. And this is that plan. You'll notice that the village square is at the corner of Rymel and Garth. The clusters, the residential clusters, were at the northeast side, but also there were a number of townhouses that were to be removed between those two phases, which resulted in the higher density. We also were proposing at that time to remove the maisonettes along Father B Row, and Upper Mill Pond was just a single building at that point in time. Moving ahead to November 2016, the master plan again showed the village square at the corner of Rymel and Garth and the residential cluster at the northeast side of the property. However, there was no longer any garden homes to be removed along Rymel Road, nor were the maisonettes along Father B Road to be touched. However, the footprint of Upper Mill Pond in the center of the site had actually increased slightly. And moving from November 2016 to November 2020, you'll notice that it hasn't changed a great deal, other than the village square has now been moved to the northeast corner of the property and the residential cluster up at the corner of Rymel and Garth. The next question of a general nature asked by residents is, will there be a quaint market square modeled after small town Ontario? And the answer to that is yes. As we showed you previously, the village square is still much as it was proposed back initially. Secondly, how can a small town atmosphere be created with 1,200 more units being added? Well, many small towns in Ontario are well over 1,200 units and they still have the small town feel. But that will be created through the use of a variety of building materials and forms and key historical design features. That's much of the job which Forec architects have done for us. The next question of a general nature, will all new units be for those 55 plus? Well, certainly anything within the gated area, such as Upper Mill Pond, will be designated for 55 plus. Zest Communities would like to stick with the 55 plus age limit, but that will depend a lot on market conditions. Secondly, will any existing garden homes be removed? The answer to that is quite simple. No, there are no garden homes proposed for removal. The next few questions relate to timing. First question, what confidence do we have that Zest will proceed with the proposed development in Village Square? Well, certainly Zest has spent millions of dollars already to get to this point. They wouldn't be going through all this work and effort if they didn't intend on proceeding. And the owners are committed to completing the project. Secondly, when does Zest propose to start the first phase of construction? A lot of this is going to depend on municipal approvals, as we went through earlier. It is a long process. However, as soon as those approvals are in place, we can start with the first phase, and that's anticipated to be in late 2022, probably the fourth quarter of 2022. The next question is, what is the timing of each phase? Well, as we mentioned earlier, Upper Mill Pond is well under construction and expected to complete it in 2021. Zest hope is for the Village Square and the garden homes to be completed within the next 5 years, but after that, each residential phase is going to depend on market conditions. Has Zest secured construction financing? Well, there has been a lot of interest from lenders. A lot of lenders have heard about the proposed redevelopment and have expressed a keen interest. And obviously, we have secured funding for Upper Mill Pond, which is under construction. How long will the total development take? It's estimated to take 10 to 12 years. Again, depends on market conditions. Zest would certainly like to proceed quicker than that. It's just going to depend on market viability. The next category of questions relate to security. How will resident security and privacy be maintained? Well, first of all, new security gates and cameras will be added. Zest is looking at improving the entire gate system as part of the new development. We understand a lot of residents are dissatisfied with the current system. If required, pedestrian gates and fencing will be added. To date, pedestrian traffic into the gated area has not been an issue. Should it become an issue, certainly gates and fencing can be added. Next question, will the security gates remain? Yes, and additional gates will be added to ensure the community remains gated. Some additional security questions. Will the problematic security gates be replaced? I touched on this a moment ago. The answer is yes, they will be. Second question, will visitors have to use more than one gate? No, they will not. Whether they use the Garth or the Bishop Ryan access, there will only be one gate they will have to travel through to gain access to their friends or family. Now let's move on to some traffic questions. Will traffic on the campus increase? Well, first of all, keep in mind the gated areas will still remain, so there's no expected substantial increase in traffic within the secured garden home area. It'll be for residents and their guests only. Traffic will increase off of Garth and Bishop Ryan. That'll be to gain access to the residential cluster at the corner of Rymal and Garth or to Village Square off of Bishop Ryan. But these entrances will be widened and turning lanes will be added to accommodate the traffic flow. Secondly, will measures be taken to control speeding? Yes, traffic calming measures are all part of the traffic plan, and these will be installed by Zest and will continue to be monitored by Zest. Some further questions related to traffic. Will there be more entrances off Garth or Rymal? And the answer is no, unfortunately. Zest requested an additional entrance, however, this was not permitted by the city. Secondly, what is the parking plan? Will street parking for visitors and residents be reduced? The answer to that is no. The garden home area, the gated area within the garden home will not change. That will still only be available to residents and their guests. Anyone using the cluster, residential cluster or the Village Square will have to park on that area. And that area will include surface parking, underground parking, or private driveways for all of the new retail and commercial areas, as well as the residential units. And some final questions related to traffic. What measures will be taken to keep cyclists and pedestrians from walking into the village? As I mentioned earlier, this has not been a problem in the past. However, Zest will monitor this and they can install pedestrian gates and fencing if required. Second question, will all new units have underground parking? Certainly the garden homes that are proposed at the south of the Village Square will have garages and driveways, much like the garden homes that are in the village now. The remainder of the residential units will have a combination of surface and underground parking, and the commercial, as I mentioned, will also have surface parking. The next category of questions relates to amenities. First question is, where will the village center services be located? in the Village Square Building E? And the answer to that is yes. That would be Zest's preferred destination. It makes sense to have that part of the village center. Second question, where will the wood shop and other amenities currently in the Edelweiss barn be located? Well, the exact location of all amenities has not been determined. That'll be later on in the approval process. But Zest is committed to providing amenities. It realizes that as the population at St. Elizabeth Village grows, there will be a need for more amenities, and it's committed to providing these amenities. Some additional amenity questions, and this first question relates back to the Edelweiss barn and the existing amenities. Will they be replaced before the current facilities are removed? Well, certainly it's a Zest intention to replace these amenities in advance. Similar to Upper Mill Pond, the intent was to build the health club and build a new pool before the pool at the Trillium Clubhouse was repurposed. So that will sort of be the philosophy going through. How many pools are proposed? Well, that's going to be based on how many pools are needed and the utilization of those pools. At this point, a specific number has not been determined. What is the plan for renovating the Trillium Clubhouse? Who will pay? Well, renovations are proposed to start shortly after the new health club is completed. As I noted earlier, the new health club has to be completed before those existing amenities can be decommissioned. But the cost of that will be paid, or is being paid, by Zest and funded through the proposed new development. There are no CAM fees being used to renovate the Trillium Clubhouse. In which phase will new amenities be provided? Again, a detailed plan of new amenities has not yet been developed, but the proposal is to have these amenities scattered throughout the development to make it easy and accessible for all residents. And some final questions related to amenities. Will residents be able to access the ponds? Some of the planning reports indicated that this would be a restricted area. Well, Zest does not anticipate any change to access to the ponds. In fact, the ponds currently are considered restricted areas, but they are still available to residents for passive use. Next question is, where are the shuffleboard and bocce courts to be located? Again, not yet determined, but Zest is committed to providing these amenities in the new development. Let's move on to some questions about services. Will public transit be available for residents both on-site and off-site? Well, the answer is yes. The HSR service will continue to be provided. We're not quite sure where the access points will be with the revised development plan or the new master plan, but certainly the intent is to continue those services. Next question, will services and roadways along Garth and Rymal be dug up again for the development? Well, these are municipal roads, and as such, they're controlled by the city. Zest certainly has no intention of digging up the roads. The only thing that may occur is there may be some service connections that have to go into the roadway, but these will be very minor in nature. And some final questions about services. Will all new buildings and units contribute to our CAM fees? And the answer is yes. That is one of the primary benefits of the new development, is to achieve a better economy of scale in order to maintain some of the lowest CAM fees in the area. Next question, Garden Home residents feel they will become second-class citizens. Will this be addressed? Well, Zest remains committed to all residents of the community on equal basis. Whether you're a resident of the Garden Homes or a resident of the new cluster residential units, they will treat everyone with the same dignity and respect and maintain everyone's interests equally. The next question relates to construction. What measures will be taken to mitigate the impact of construction on existing residents? Well, Zest will use all measures available to them to minimize any disruption to the existing residents. We've learned a lot from the construction of Upper Mill Pond. We anticipate the new development to be far less disruptive for residents because the sites can be accessed right off of Rymal and Garth and not have to go through the built-up Garden Home area. But a formal residents communication plan will be adopted prior to construction start, and we'll continue to monitor that throughout construction. And finally, a few financial related questions to address. Will the number of buildings and units lower market values of Garden Homes? Well, with the additional amenities and the additional of the Village Square, we're expecting exactly the opposite. We're expecting market values will continue to increase. Over the last few years, the Garden Home values have gone up considerably, and with the addition of these amenities and the appeal which we feel that the St. Elizabeth Mills will have in the community, We feel the opposite will in fact be true. Will our CAM fees be increased to support the redevelopment? The answer is no. As I mentioned, one of the primary benefits of the redevelopment is the economies of scale and the fact that Zest can maintain the fees as low as possible. And some final financial questions. Will the additional units and density lower our quality of life? Well, in fact, we feel the opposite is going to be true. We feel it will enhance everyone's quality of life by providing a more vibrant and self-sufficient community. I know when my wife and I considered buying a unit at Upper Mill Pond, the future plans for the town square and the commercial and the retail are what drew us to this. And I'm sure that a lot of baby boomers who are the next generation who are going to be buying garden homes and the cluster residential units will be more attracted because of these amenities and features. And lastly, how will our social programs and activities be managed with so many new residents? This is going to take some planning on Zest's part, and they certainly are committed to that. They want to improve the quality of their programs and activities, so through proper planning and staffing, this can easily be managed. Well, that concludes the formal presentation as well as the questions and answers. I hope that you were able to glean some information that will be of use to you. I hope we have allayed any fears that you may have about the redevelopment, and I trust that you are as excited about the redevelopment and new master plan as Zest is. We will continue to keep you updated as we go through the process of the municipal approvals and as we get into the planning of the first phase of the development. So thank you very much and goodbye.